This is a Fox News alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. Fox News has exclusively obtained a copy of the so-called side deal to President Obama's nuclear agreement with Iran that has led to another wave of opposition from critics. It clearly shows allowing Iran to conduct the inspections of one of its own major military facilities with ties to its nuclear program. Correspondent Kevin Cork is at the presidential vacation compound on Martha's Vineyard with these breaking details. Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening to you, Brett. You are right about this document. Very interesting. Fox News exclusively obtaining a document dated 2015, and it certainly supports the AP's reporting that Iran will play a major role in the so-called inspection regimen of one of its major nuclear sites at Parchin by providing the IAEA with crucial information and details. Now, let me show you just some of what we have learned in taking a look at this document. It's called Separate Arrangement 2. In it, Iran would provide the IAEA with photos and videos, also environmental samples of select locations at Parchin, taking into account some military concerns. By the way, it also would ensure technical authenticity of activities, meaning making sure that the nuclear work that was happening there. But here's the rub. The IAEA would still use Iran's authenticated equipment, and then all that would be followed by a IAEA Director General. And as you pointed out very well, that is just some of what has critics calling this international agreement flawed. But clearly that is not the way the IAEA sees it. A misrepresentation. That's how a UN nuclear watchdog group is describing an explosive report from the Associated Press that suggests that Iran will be able to self-police inspection of the nuclear site at Parchin, where the regime has long been suspected of trying to build nuclear weapons. Citing a draft report, the AP reported that the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, would get data from Iran on the site instead of its own inspectors on the ground. A notion the IAEA Director General Yukiya Amano rejected, saying in a statement, quote, "I am disturbed by statements suggesting that the IAEA has given responsibility for nuclear inspections to Iran. Such statements misrepresent the way in which we will undertake this important verification work." But verification has been a problem in the past, with the Iranians as far back as 2004 repeatedly walling inspectors about its nuclear activities. State Department officials say under this agreement, Iran won't be able to avoid layers of scrutiny.
Not all of it is human inspections. There's other monitoring capabilities that are going to be at play, all the way from the mines to centrifuge activity. And again, I would just say we're very confident that in the intrusiveness of this regimen that's been
How compliance is defined, however, remains a mystery, as neither the White House nor congressional lawmakers have been able to study final details of all of the so-called side agreements between the IAEA and Iran.
I think those who even support the deal have to insist that the administration must come forward and reveal what is the content of this agreement between Iran and the IAEA.
Meanwhile, the White House got a major boost when a senior Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee announced that she will vote to back the plan. Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill saying in a statement, quote, "This deal isn't perfect and no one trusts Iran, but it has become clear to me that the world is united behind this agreement." Defense Secretary Ash Carter declined to weigh in on this Iran inspection controversy, but he did point out today, Brett, that the U.S. has a very strong presence in the Gulf region and is ready to respond to the Iranians in any aggression should the need arise. Brett?
More on all this with the panel. Kevin, thank you. Now to a presidential race still almost 450 days away from its conclusion that features candidates sniping at each other in mid-season form. And almost daily poll results measuring in great detail each fluctuation in public field. We have Fox team coverage of the 2016 race. Doug McKelway with some very encouraging numbers for a vice president still on the fence. Catherine Herridge with even more questions about how secure Hillary Clinton's communications really were as Secretary of State. But we begin with chief political correspondent Carl Cameron in Detroit tonight and the story of two Republicans matching insult for insult. Good evening, Carl.
Hi, Brett. Whether it's Marco Rubio in Detroit for an economic speech or Mike Huckabee in Israel talking to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Bush-Trump battle is knocking all the candidates out of the headlines. With dueling town halls 19 miles apart in New Hampshire last night, Trump threw the first punch at Jeb Bush.
I don't see how he's electable. Mr. Trump doesn't have a proven conservative record.
The latest Quinnipiac polls in the key battleground states of Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania explain feistiness. Trump leads in Florida and Pennsylvania and runs second to Governor John Kasich in Ohio. Bush went after Trump again this morning.
There's a big difference between Donald Trump and me. I'm a proven conservative with a record. He isn't. I cut taxes every year. He's proposed the largest tax increase in mankind's history, not just our own country's history. I have been consistently pro-life. He, until recently, was for partial birth abortion.
Bush adamantly rejects Trump's proposal to repeal the 14th Amendment, granting citizenship to immigrant children born in the U.S.
I think that people born in this country ought to be American citizens. Okay, now we got that over with.
Bush even suggested that without the 14th Amendment, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, who supports its repeal, might not be citizens and able to run for president.
If people are here legally, they have a visa, and they have a child who's born here, I think that they ought to be American citizens. That's how he came. You know, so to suggest that we make it impossible for a talented person like that not to be a candidate for president, or Ted Cruz, I mean, I think we're getting a little going overboard here. We're listening to the emotion rather than to the reality of this.
Cruz was born in Canada to a Cuban father and American mother. His campaign fired back in a tweet, quote, Ted Cruz has not spent a single moment on earth when he was not a natural-born American citizen. Just ask his mom. Rubio's speech to the Detroit Economic Club was overshadowed by the Trump-Bush battle. Was born here in '71. His parents became citizens in '75.
My parents were permanent legal residents of the United States for 15 years before I was even born. So it's not, they're talking about people that were in this country illegally.
I'll use the word anchor baby.
Hillary Clinton attacked both Bush and Trump in a bilingual video for using the phrase anchor babies regarding immigrants who come here to take advantage of birthright citizenship.
You know, anchor babies as they're described.
If there's another term that I can come up with, I'm happy to hear it.
Trump questioned President Obama's birth certificate and citizenship for years and made a huge issue of it in 2008. He doesn't want to talk about that. Rick Santorum, whose father was an Italian immigrant, told the National Press Club that most of his rivals' suggestions won't solve the problem.
Amnesty will perpetuate the problem. Whether it was a pass in the Gang of Eight bill or the right to a permanent work permit supported by Ted Cruz and others, in any event, it's amnesty.
In 2013, the National Hispanic Leadership Council sent a memo to Congress urging them to sort of watch their language on illegal immigration and specifically said, don't say anchor babies. The co-chairman of that organization at the time was Jeb Bush, and the organization still lists him as an advisory committee member on its webpage today. Brett?
Carl Cameron, live in Detroit. Carl, thank you. Well, wasn't the only thing Hillary Clinton decided to buy herself. The State Department now says Clinton's BlackBerry was not government issue either, and therefore not government encrypted. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge tells us it's all part of evidence in a lawsuit involving the Democratic frontrunner.
In a D.C. federal court, lawyers for the State Department argued that they couldn't do more to search for Hillary Clinton's records or those of aides Huma Abedin and Cheryl Mills because the FBI custody of the server and thumb drives. Plaintiffs said the judge was not persuaded.
The government has now conceded that they have an affirmative obligation to go back to the FBI to look at those records and those devices.
Buried in a recent court filing is the admission that the BlackBerries used by Abedin and Mills were likely destroyed. Nor did she use government computers.
How did the State Department think that Mrs. Clinton, as Secretary of State, was going to go about doing her business?
Mrs. Clinton used a personal iPad that was not certified as secure by State Department IT specialists. A 2008 Intelligence Community Directive known as ICD 503. And there can be no approval if, quote, that information system would result in a high potential impact on organizations or individuals.
It looks suspicious, I must say, as well, from a counterintelligence viewpoint. I mean, if I were the FBI, I would definitely have questions about what the motivations were to choose a firm that sounds certainly very unsuited to what needed done.
Asked about the security of her personal devices, the Clinton campaign was noticeably silent. The State Department spokesman searched his papers for a prepared statement.
I just say there are reviews and investigations now. including by RIG and by Congress, and so it's just going to be inappropriate for me to comment.
The Denver IT firm that took on the server contract for the Clintons has now hired a crisis management team.
They've been getting hate calls and Twitter attacks. It's not been fun for them.
And significantly, the firm was not very forthcoming about how they landed the contract.
They say that they submitted a proposal to the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton, in 2013 and were hired. They did not tell us, it was one of the questions we asked that they didn't answer, how they knew that that opportunity existed to submit the proposal.
And late today, a federal court order was issued in that Judicial Watch case, and the State Department is now legally required to work with the FBI, and the Bureau has been directed to provide any new emails, including those that were deleted by Mrs. Clinton and then recovered as part of the FBI investigation, Brett.
We'll follow it, Catherine. Thank you.
You're welcome.
He is not officially running, at least not yet, but Vice President Joe Biden is getting encouragement tonight in the form of new poll results that have him outperforming Clinton in head-to-head matchups against Republicans. Correspondent Doug McKelway looks at the numbers tonight.
They say nature abhors a vacuum, so may politics. A new Quinnipiac poll continues to suck the air out of Hillary Clinton's campaign, and that Vice President Joe Biden, if he chooses to, could fill the void.
Certainly one imagines that the people who are trying to convince Vice President Biden to run will Xerox this poll like crazy and hand it out.
The poll focuses on head-to-head matchups in the key swing states of Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. No candidate has won the presidency since 1960 without taking two of those three big states. If the election were held today, Biden would beat Donald Trump in Florida, in Ohio, and in Pennsylvania. One trouble for Biden is that he has not announced his candidacy yet.
You are never as popular as the day before you announce for president. Then you start going downhill. Why? They start replaying the and goofs and problems, and Joe Biden's had a long political career, and he's got a lot of those.
Biden may have an ace in the hole.
Taking this ride with you is one of the great pleasures of our lives. Joe, you are my brother.
As his eulogy during the June funeral of the vice president's son, Beau, demonstrated, the president has grown close to Biden. He may see his legacy better fulfilled in a Biden term, which is more likely, some speculate, if a Justice Department investigation into the Clinton emails ramps up.
This investigation is going forward. President Obama wants it to go forward. And the reason he wants it to go forward is because he does not want her to be the Democratic nominee.
Still, the Quinnipiac Biden would have to overcome huge deficits in the Democratic primaries. Clinton beats Biden among registered Democrats in all three vital swing states. Among the GOP field, Bush, Rubio, and Trump all lead Clinton in Florida. In Pennsylvania, Bush and Rubio also best her, while Trump lags. And in Ohio, Clinton retains a thin lead over Bush and Trump, but is now losing to Rubio.
There are more than 14 months to go before the general election, a political eternity, so these horse race numbers may not mean as much as some of the time-tested leadership traits that are also contained in the Quinnipiac poll. Governor Bush scores best among all the candidates in the areas of honesty, empathy, and ability to handle an international crisis. Brett?
Doug, thank you. Up next, wildfires out west claim the lives of those trying to fight them. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 11 in Los Angeles says sheriff's investigators say they plan to recommend that Caitlyn Jenner be charged with vehicular manslaughter for her role in a fatal car crash on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu last February. Investigators say Jenner was driving unsafely for prevailing road conditions. Fox 2 in St. Louis, where police deployed tear gas to break up street protests last night after white officers shot and killed a black teenager who they say pointed a handgun at them earlier that day. And this is a live look at San Francisco from our affiliate out there, Fox 2. The big story there tonight, going after Uber for using criminal drivers. Reports say district attorneys from San Francisco and Los Angeles are suing the Bay Area-based company. San Francisco's DA says the roster of Uber drivers in those cities includes convicted sex offenders, kidnappers, and a murderer. The company says it has deactivated the vast majority of those drivers. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.